Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to another wonderful episode of the Prime Life Podcast. This is Laura Dinan Haber, joined by Mary Crean, and we're so excited to be here with you today. We have a wonderful guest, and for me, this is a conversation that Mary and I have been having since Prime Life appeared on the scene a few years back now. And I love the view. I love the angle. It's different than what we've heard so far. So my guess is we're going to be diving in deep. So without further ado, Mary, how have you been?
I've been great, and I love that you used my elongated name, and I give you credit because you said that really very well. So thank you for that.
Well, you know, they say a lot isn't a name, and I'm sure we might get into storytelling and what things matter here. So without further ado, I'll let Mary kick off the show. But again, so excited you're all here with us today and welcome you to comment in the post below and really share your thoughts with us as we continue to have on great guests. So Mary, to you.
Thank you. Yeah, we do. This guest is really top shelf. So before I introduce her, I found her on LinkedIn. I saw this amazing woman really hitting it out of the park with all the different components of our topic, longevity. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Alexa Mikhail. She's a senior health and wellness reporter at Fortune magazine, covering primarily aging and longevity, mental health, and workplace wellness. Really all the things that we hold near and dear to our heart, and that's really become such a focus in the longevity landscape. Alexa, welcome to the Prime Life Podcast. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for such a kind introduction, Mary, and Laura, for having me. Really excited to talk about all things longevity, aging, and mental health. There's so much going on in the space right now. Yeah, so I've been at Fortune for 2.5 years and joined to help start our wellness vertical called Fortune Well. And so you can just look it up. It's on our main Fortune website, and we're really in the business of trying to help people feel better. And there's this intersection between workplace and wellness, and that, you know, if you don't feel good, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be a good leader, you're not going to work well. So that's sort of our primary focus. And, you know, since we started and, you know, we were sort of experimenting with what resonated with our audience, we've just noticed that, you know, aging and longevity, and we can get into sort of defining what we mean by those, is really pertinent to our audience.
So let's jump in and define that. What is longevity? And would you say it's having a moment right now?
Yeah, I definitely think it's having a moment. And to kind of look back a little bit, it's because, you know, at the turn of, you know, the 20th century, we're only expected to live to about 47. And now in the US, it's about 77 and 73 globally. And so we are living longer lives. And so it sort of begs the question of how do we sustain that longer life? How do we age well? And I think to also bring in this, we're not just talking about lifespan, we're talking about health span. And so that's the difference between, you know, lifespan is how long we live and health span is how long we live in good health, which experts have told me is roughly 10 years. And so it's not just about living longer, it's also about how do we live as healthy, how do we live healthy and long? And so, yeah, it's having a moment because I think, you know, in just the last 100 years, we're in this sort of newfound decades of life where, you know, we're kind of defining what does that mean to age well. And so longevity as a whole, I think is the term that seems appealing to people because it obviously insinuates we want to live longer. And I think that sometimes, you know, aging has some negative connotations in our society that, you know, we also hope to debunk in our work.
So again, all near and dear to my heart, something that I didn't share with you, but Laura knows this. I started my career in the health and wellness industry. Specifically, my husband and I owned a gym. We called it a fitness center. And actually, funny enough, at the time when I was quite young, many of our clients were older. They were individuals who wanted to be stronger, healthier. They wanted to be better at certain sports they were involved in, like squash and golf and tennis and all those good things. And we were in the strength training kind of arena with cardio. This has just been phenomenal for me when I look at individuals that I know over time. Those that have decided to really take to heart not only the physical, but the mental health wellness.
hmm
How do you, Alexa, how have you, since you've been in this space, what do you see are key ingredients? And again, living longer, living better, as we like to say on the Prime Life podcast.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of noise in this space. I think that wellness is a super broad category and that you might see different hacks and tricks to sort of optimize your health across social media. And that can feel very overwhelming. I also think there's protocols that are not always tested and tried and true. So I think it's also a space to be very careful in because I think things might sound really appealing and they might not work for everyone. With that said, the cornerstones of healthy aging really remain true, and they might sound really basic, but a lot of aging researchers and scientists that I've talked to might say that things might be coming out in the pipeline that could really help us optimize our health. But right now, it really is sleeping, quality of sleep. It's exercising and moving. It's eating well. And really, I think a huge one to your point about mental health and wellness also is maintaining strong social connections. I had the joy of interviewing the authors of The Good Life about a year ago. And what they found in one of the longest studies on happiness to date at Harvard is that the level of your happiness at the end of your life is highly dependent and most dependent on the strength of your relationships. Obviously, other things play into that, but that really was their major finding. And I think that is a huge part of longevity as well, because if you're happier, your well-being and your mental health is likely better. And therefore your physical health outcomes are better because you're also engaging with people. Social isolation puts people at risk for a host of chronic conditions and heart disease, and therefore early mortality and cognitive decline. So I think that it sounds simple, but doing little things to connect with one another alongside, again, that sleeping, eating well basics is really still the most important, despite that there's a lot of noise in this space, which we can, again, get into.
So you talk about doing little things, and I agree, right? So there's individuals around me in my life where they are aging, whether they're fresh into retirement, whether they are in their 80s and almost 90s. And I think about those who are doing well. And I agree, right? There's a lot of health tied into humanity. And like you said, Alexa, it seems simple. Well, eat well. Yep, we've been told that. Sleep a lot or sleep well. Okay, we try. Stay connected with humans. Like it's in my opinion, it's both easier and more difficult with the amount of technology around us, right? Because you're located where you are, Mary and I are here, yet we're seeing each other. It feels as though we're almost in the room together, even though we're apart. So there's connectedness, right? There's that sense of connectedness, but there is nothing like actually being in that space. And especially as people age and watching those in my life, it's almost as though we need to do more to make humans human again and to kind of increase the humanity to get us reconnected and sitting around telling the stories, back around, fires where we first started. So a long way of saying, talking about what might sound simple for tips or tricks, but have you picked up through your interviews or your own lifestyle a few things that you could share with our listeners?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years. But we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Nurse.
Yeah, I love that. And what you said about sort of getting back to humanity, I think, it goes without saying that while technology has benefited many of us, what we're doing right now is all online. I'm in this interview and we get the chance to do that. At the same time, it's really easy to sort of retreat onto our devices. And I think it's easy to say set screen time limits and all of that. But what you said about getting back to humanity is really important. And so what are ways to do that? The U.S. Surgeon General has really been vocal about this. And, he's talked about his 5 for 5 challenge. I believe it's once a day, reach out to 5 people you care about for 5 minutes. It's, kind of really tangible habits. Another one, I think about is sort of in those third spaces that we are in our lives, to say hi to people, say hi to your local, barista or the receptionist at the gym and ask their name. If you go to a local restaurant, and it might sound like this is not going to become your best friend, but there's a way of feeling more connected in our space that I think we lost in the bulk of the pandemic and under social isolation orders. So I do think it's as simple as just being more open to the people around us and treating people with kindness, assuming the best, right? It's like that whole thing of when you think about the grocery store, right? You never know why someone's having a bad day. I think to just try to see people for who they are and what they're experiencing and be open is something that I think about. I also have sort of a motto now, since reporting a lot on loneliness, is that when you think about someone, text them, call them, reach out to them. We always say, oh my God, I thought of you, a couple of weeks ago when I saw this painting that reminded me of you, but then you never do it because we're so easily sidetracked to the next thing or we're in the middle of a work assignment. It's not hard, and it means so much to not only that other person, but also to you. So I think that's something, that I try to live by. And I think it's hard to find the space and the time to connect with others, but it can be simple. It can be using technology. It can be in person. It can be joining an event. It can be volunteering. But I think it's as simple as call, text, use the technology, but text someone you love and, maybe start up a conversation and plan a time to see them in person. Yeah, that's some of the things I would say.
I love that. I heard something the other day, and it was along the lines of no one likes to be the first to say hello, but everyone likes to be greeted. And it's
everyone loves
true,
to hear
right?
their name, right?
Yes.
Like the power of asking people their name. And it just shows that even if you don't know them that well, that you care and you're eager to treat them as that individual that they are, wherever they're coming from that day.
Yeah, your comment made me think of a story. I was driving in this morning, and I have a twin sister who lives across the country. So I used that time to connect with her, and she said, Papa, our grandfather, and he's in his 90s, Papa texted me, and he told me that he had a story to tell me, and that, to call when I was available. So she calls up our grandfather, and she hears this ridiculous story, and it's just funny, but it's exactly that, Alexa. He was at a place, someone had made a comment on a shirt that she had gifted him, et cetera, but he thought to call her. He thought to text her. He reached out. He used the technology. And I think a lot of what we saw, and you could maybe likely agree or comment on this, is that the age of technology users, what we used to think was for the younger generations is now for all generations, right? And the pandemic really taught all people to access technology, to be able to connect with humans once again. But it just goes to show, it made her day. She wanted to tell me about it. I'm sure that he had a great time and he told someone else about it. But again, it was one idea, and that was at least 3 or 4 people with a smile all thinking about one another. So I do agree with you that stuff may feel small, but it matters and it's important, right? It's happiness.
Absolutely. I love that. And yeah, exactly. It's just a small moment that makes, a huge difference. And I also think that's the power of storytelling as well. I had written a story where I talked about my own grandfather. He was just a big storyteller. He has since passed away, but, he was an immigrant from Egypt along with my dad in the 1960s. And, just telling family histories as well and taking the time to ask questions. And maybe that comes from the fact that I'm in the business of asking questions, but we're all curious about something and someone, and it's just great to reach out to someone and be like, actually, what was it like to immigrate to this country? How are we not asking those questions? So I love that.
Mary, sorry to jump in again, but I would be remiss. And we're going to air this after the holiday season, so I can say this out loud. But one of the gifts that I got for my mother is actually a book from my children to her. And it's all about questions about grandma. And it's about my mom fills it out about her parents and her grandparents and what she loves. So my kids can get an understanding of who their grandmother is and who their extended family is. Because to your point, unless we share stories and tell one another, unfortunately, a lot of times these details go when the relatives pass to the next chapter. So when I saw it, I knew, because I too love questions. I was like, we're going to do this. We're going to get this, because I wouldn't even be able to answer half of those things in the book. So I think it's important.
I love that. I feel like my siblings or parents would be like, you're giving me homework for Christmas, but you know what? It's great in the long run. I love that.
No, I agree. And I know within my own family, my parents are 87 and 88. And my mom's an immigrant from Italy. She came here when she was 13. There are a lot of things that she will share with us now that we didn't know then. And, it's like, we need to get this in auditory version or in writing so that we can continue to share about our family heritage, our culture, and the names and the places. It's so important. So I love we're talking about doing, saying hello to people by name and all of that. And that's actually, for me, that's one of my strong suits. I have to admit, there are times people look at me a little odd when I do that, especially if I'm in a store and I'm trying to be a little bit engaging. But I also, sometimes you can sense when someone's having a rough day or someone's had a rough day. And isn't it nice when you can spread a little bit of sunshine, even if it is to a total stranger? My husband had a great story not that long ago. He was at a local retailer and this gentleman came up to him and said, "Oh my gosh, I love your hat." It happened to be a Patriots hat, and it was a special one that he had. And he said, "Oh, I wish I could afford to buy this hat," or something like that. And so my husband went around, did his shopping, and he left the store. The gentleman was still there, and he took his hat off and he gave it to him. And he's like, "No, I can't take that." And he's like, "No, looks good, better on you." And it was like a big / small gesture. And I say big because the hat, he loved that hat. But, and you know how men sometimes can be with their sports memorabilia. But he said he still talks about it because it just left a significant impact, like in how much gratitude and how this gentleman just really perked up. And I think when we do, like, it's like gratitude, acts of kindness, you said being kind, it can go such a long way and it don't cost nothing.
Exactly.
So I just think that's an important part of living longer, living better. And I believe as we do get older, some of our relationships, people pass away or maybe we move or whatnot, and it does become, more of a challenge. But I can give you so many examples, which I won't. I'll give you one more. My dad, when he is around family, my mom's always like, he eats so much more, like in a good way. And I said, "Mom, because he likes the social." My dad's a big social engager. He loves to joke. He has a great sense of humor. And it's about, I believe it's feeding that socialization. You talked about isolation, and we know it's an epidemic, not just among those, 55 plus, but also with younger people.
Yeah.
And we did have a guest on who talked about that, and that's a whole other episode. Long-winded, of course, but I would love to know a little bit from you, Alexa. You talked about your grandfather, and I love that you shared that story, but what are some other, perhaps a few favorite stories that you have gained through your interviewing on longevity that have just stayed with you?
Definitely. And I just wanted to point out, what you said about it doesn't cost anything. I think, we've heard the term biohacking be thrown around a lot. And there is this one side of sort of the conversation of individual pursuits to live longer and to spend a lot of money on different things. And, some of these things might be working. Some of them might not be. We see them a lot in media. We see them on social media. But to also reframe the conversation about, I want to, I guess, make a difference between that individual pursuit for longevity and sort of public health measures and low cost, no cost ways to feel better and to age well. And so I think that's really important when we think about strengthening our social connections, is that something that feels more accessible? And I think we also need to be prioritizing ways to do that. I was at a fellowship at the Association of Gerontology, and I met with a few professors that were trying to create public health initiatives where they were bringing people together in their community, those 55 and older who might be facing more rates of social isolation. Again, those are in, accessible public spaces, ways to engage, little exercise classes. And so I think, that's something that we should always be distinguishing between when we think about longevity. Sometimes I think I was telling you this in our prep call, but I almost sometimes find it as two different fields, right? We're talking about the individual pursuit, and that might feel reserved for those that have the means and ability to do that. And then there's the public health initiatives. And I do think the public health initiatives are imperative to sort of not exacerbate existing inequalities when we think about who has the access to age well, and it shouldn't be reserved for those with the means. So I think that's an important caveat I wanted to make. But back to your question, I think a couple stories I've been really excited about. I believe this one was a couple years ago, and kind of talking about the intersection of work and aging. I wrote a story about women, particularly aging at work and managing menopause. And again, I am in my mid-20s, so I have not experienced that before. However, I believe it's really important for all of us to be talking about it, to prepare for it, to talk to some of our family members about it. So to also caveat, I have not experienced this at work personally. However, what was really important about the story was that I interviewed someone who's an executive, and she was telling me, I was at the pinnacle of my career, and I believe she used exactly that phrase, and I felt like I was firing on all cylinders, but I was incredibly anxious and depleted because I thought that my symptoms of brain fog, was a reflection of me, because there is wide, undereducation on the realities of menopause. I think she felt just incredibly defeated, and that if she spoke about it, right, that she would have to face, more backlash from her male counterparts in leadership, and more stereotypes around ageism, sexism, and everything sort of combined. And she kind of felt like there's this very small window where women feel like they're in their prime while they're leaders. And so I think, we use that story to sort of just say that this is what's happening, but to also say that if we don't find ways to help women age at work and feel comfortable and supported and respected, that there's a huge also effect to the bottom line. These people are going to then leave the workforce. There's a survey, I don't want to get it wrong or say it here, but from Electra, where the percentage of people that are having to leave their jobs because they feel undersupported at work because of menopause symptoms, and what solutions we can have, whether we have more benefits to addressing that. I also believe it's just a major culture issue at its core to normalize this, to provide flexible work environments, is what I've heard experts sort of alluding to as well. She talked about the fact that at their work place, she had helped start, a major Slack group. I think it was just called Hot Flashes. And, it was just to normalize that people around her were also experiencing this. And I don't have the answer, but I think just starting the conversation, and I believe a lot of companies in the business of women's health, and particularly menopause, are growing right now, and, are the biggest sort of place for investment even, which is really awesome to see. So I think that also goes in line with another story where we talked about silver linings around, the fact that retaining and attaining older workers is important for the bottom line, now that we have just a wider breadth of generations working together. Because if we're living longer, we're working longer. Retirement is not a one and done. People cannot, as you two always are talking about it and working on in your podcast and normalizing that, people either don't want to or they simply can't afford to. And women are disproportionately burdened with caregiving and being in sort of the sandwich generation, caring for children and an aging parent. So this story really focused on the importance of how can we retain older workers? How can we make them feel like they belong and that they're not coming against sort of this ageism? And again, that's a lofty sort of goal. But I do think that's really important, because everyone is aging and everyone is going to want to be treated with dignity and respect to work as long as they want to, as long as they can, and also maybe transition out to something different, have flexibility in what that looks like. So I think just the conversation about what it means to age at work has been really fascinating for me.
I mean, I love that you brought that up, because I am someone that has gone through menopause. I'm just going to put it out there. And I don't I don't always feel comfortable saying that, but I guess I'm saying it today on the podcast. And so many of the things that you mentioned are, spot on. And, when we go to the doctor, we don't always talk about these things. We talk maybe a little bit, but it's like a very different conversation. But I do agree that I think that should be lifted up. And I really loved what you said about the disparity in terms of everyone should be given that opportunity to live longer, live better. And it shouldn't come down to those that have means and those that don't. And you're right, because sometimes when I think about, like, I've been taking a lot of vitamins, that's been in addition, I'm a regular exerciser. As I mentioned earlier, started my career in the health and wellness space. But I know I've been buying more vitamins and I do believe they're helping. But, vitamins cost a lot of money. And when I purchased my vitamins and I just started taking creatine, I just think like, gee, like, what if you don't have the means, even for vitamins and things of that nature, again, to help build the health as I'm aging and growing older, and I want to stay sharp and I want to be vital in my job and also in my personal and professional life. So I just think it's really a good point that you're making, and I would love to hear more. And I'm going to be watching all the great articles that you'll be writing, because I do think that needs to be lifted up, even more. Sorry, Laura, I took a little bit of your space, but yeah, would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, people are always interested in what are the people that we're calling biohackers doing at the extremes, and that's something that we do report on. But I think it's also always important to say that some things have or haven't been tested, and not everyone can go and have a subscription to sort of these preventative health clinics where you're testing yourself and monitoring yourself. And there's a huge surge of people interested in wearables and tracking their sleep and glucose monitors. And again, these things might be really great and helpful and push the needle in a lot of ways for people. But again, I think alongside those innovations that are not going anywhere, that are only going to be, I think, in this space more and more, we should also be always talking about how to make this a public health initiative. I heard someone say at this Longevity Investors Conference in the fall, bringing longevity to the masses. And I think we can say a lot of that, right? But we need to act on it. And again, that's easier said than done. So I'd be curious. And I'm not one of those scientists or researchers. And so I'm just having that lens of reporting on it and trying to hopefully give that nuance and that space to sort of where this industry is going. Again, there's so much noise in this space now, and it's clear that this is something that resonates with our audience. So we want to be mindful that while, we definitely cater to executives that may be having the means to do some of this, it's not everyone.
Yeah, I love that. It's really right. It's the understanding that longevity, wellness, this is an everyone conversation, even though the solutions, the reactions, what people choose to do, what they can do, have the means to do, vary person to person, and everything's individual. But it's something affecting every one of us, which is
absolutely. Yeah, we're all aging,
That's the goal, right? Every time someone has a birthday and they're like, oh, I can't believe I'm this number. It's like, I internalize that and think my goal is to make it to the biggest number I possibly can. And maybe it's not going to some of these extremes, right? These extreme biohacking initiatives that some people focus on, but maybe it is taking the time to understand, okay, what does my schedule look like?
Yeah.
Can I put the phone down earlier in the nighttime? Can I carve 30 minutes out to go for a walk or to make that phone call or send that text, climb while I'm, on the treadmill, or while I'm outside, just enjoying nature and getting some fresh air and some sunshine on me. But making those small changes really to understand, like, if you're going to get better, be better, your best self, whatever that is defined individually, what can we do? And for me, it's looking at taking the stairs instead of the elevator at work. I know that I'm very sedentary here, right? It's a matter of identifying those small opportunities to make those changes in hopes that they'll build up and compound over time in the same way that our financial interests do. But excuse me, it's interesting to hear you talk about this, right? And you had mentioned, you're in your 20s at that part of your career. And I love the viewpoint because you're taking such curiosity to the subject, where you're coming from your 20s. I'm coming at it from my 30s. Mary's coming at it from her 30s as well. So we're just, we're in a different parts of our journeys. But really, I think it's important to not only have a broader, larger conversation, but having all bits and pieces of the conversation too, right? You talked about the health perspective. and how a lot of people have been, keep their health realities tight to their chest, which is completely fine. And we have HIPAA in place for that. But it's really having more of a broad-based conversation, whether it's a Slack group or whether it's however they means to communicate, and making people understand that it's not just you. There are other people. And then again, it goes back to the community building, right? And the humanizing of this aging process is making people understand it's not you. People are here for you, and being able to reach out and kind of interact in that way.
Yeah, and I definitely think, to your point, it's important that even if everyone's in different stages of life, it's important to be curious about things that are inevitably going to impact you. So I see it from, this is my job, but this is also will be my life, and it already is, is your life. And I'm already fascinated, by the subject. And I think we just have to be more curious about the realities of aging. And I think another important point, you sort of mentioned, people not wanting to share how old they're turning and their birthdays, and it sort of made me think of something that Deborah Whitman, who's the Chief Public Policy Officer at the AARP, said. She wrote a book recently called The Second 50, and really sort of reimagining some of the questions that we have. Again, kind of that point of why we're having a longevity moment right now, because we didn't really think about the second 50, before, because we weren't living that long. And so one of the things she brings up is that it's really also about mindset, and that people actually add years to their life if they think about aging positively versus negatively. And again, that's not the individual's fault, because there's a lot of societal prescription around aging and marketing and advertisements that definitely make you feel a certain way if you are getting older. And obviously, I think that impacts women more directly in terms of sort of aesthetics as well, and the pressures to look young. So that's not something that is on the individual to fix. But at the end of the day, sort of leaning into the fact that if you see aging, as I've heard it from a few people, I'm thinking actually about an interview that Gail and Oprah had about turning, and Melinda French Gates, about turning 60, and saying, I'm actually so excited. I feel like my life is just beginning. I can't remember who said it. And I think that's actually a mindset shift that I hope I will have then, that I think you look at them and you're like, oh, that's actually really exciting. You might have this newfound purpose. You have this wisdom, you have this experience, and you're also getting to live longer and hopefully healthier because of, having a longer health span and focusing on those core tenets of aging well, while also being mindful that it's the way we talk about aging, and sort of not thinking that it's this awful thing that we should fear because we're all doing it. And do we really want to live the last 20 to 30 years of our lives thinking that it's just that we're awful? And I really hope not. So whatever we can do to change also the way we talk about it, because I would love to think that, at those ages, your life is just beginning, or maybe you're starting something new. I interviewed a 70-year-old founder. We should reimagine what it means to age, and that, and also kind of break some of those stereotypes that, people don't want to, learn more or pivot or stay in their career or engage with others. That's not true. Or engage with technology, right? There's those stereotypes. And I think we also have to do a job collectively in the media of combating that.
Yeah, I love that. We hosted TEDx Hartford a few weeks back, and we had a woman give a talk. Her name is Ashley Rigby, and it was all about fresh perspective on retirement. And I'll throw it in show notes. It's worth a listen. And Ashley's perspective is, she's somebody who identifies as older. She's always identified as older, and she talks about, when we look at individuals who are graduating high school, for example, this is one of the points from her talk, we call them seniors, and we're excited for them. And they're going to go off and they're going to do amazing things in their lives. We've set them up. We've taught them. They've grown bonds. They've become more human than they were 18 years previously, right? And their richness of what's coming next. And everyone celebrates. They have the hats, they throw them in the air, and they're excited. So what would happen if we treated seniors like seniors, right? Like, what if we got excited for them? What if we just changed the complete perspective to not saying that it's over, but to your point of it's just beginning? So that she had a few points in there that really kind of made me stop and think, to say, yes, like I'm already on this train, but now I'm on the train even faster, because I think to the point of the 70-year-old founder and people who are working to redefine societal, what some people believe as norms, or what people would typically be doing, right? Air quotes. There are plenty of individuals out there that are breaking every single boundary in every positive way to say, listen, age is a number. I'm going to do these amazing things. I'm an amazing person. And this is just how my journey is going to be. So I think the more, to your point, that we celebrate that and uplift those stories, the better I think the conversation will be for all of society when they have more things to talk about other than, here's the cane or here's the decorations, right? When people turn 50 and you're turning over the hill, like 50 is so young these days. It's unreal. So I think we have a lot to do and we have a long way to go, but
Yeah.
individuals such as yourself are, I think, helping spread that conversation, the mindset to help us hopefully get there at some point as a society.
And older adults are not a monolith too, right? Everyone has their individual experience. So maybe it's you're a 70-year-old founder. Maybe you are finding purpose through, I don't know, your friends or your volunteering or even caregiving or going back to school or, and I think just normalizing too that it can look different for everyone. You don't need to also start a company to say that, you're changing the narrative on aging. You can do a lot of different things. And yeah, and I'm not in that experience, but I hope to have that mindset when that time comes.
I have a feeling you will, Alexa. I don't know why, but I do. But I think in life in general, here's my wisdom. It's always about the mindset, no matter where you are, no matter what stage of your life. Not have a positive mindset if you can. Now, we understand that sometimes challenges come our way, and it does become a little bit challenging at times to kind of deal with situations, etc.
Absolutely.
But you have a choice. That's the one thing you do is have a choice as to, do you want to be positive or negative? And, I love what you're doing. I love what you're writing. And we're going to have to, again, stay really tuned into, and we could talk offline for some of the people you've interviewed, because I think they'd be really great guests on Prime Life podcast. But let's, as we kind of we have a little bit more time to chit chat, but I would love to hear from you. In all of your interviews, is there any one particular biohack that you yourself have utilized or tried or encouraged others to
Yeah,
try?
definitely. And I did want to also clarify, I think it doesn't need to just be, just be positive and don't be negative. I think it's easy to say that when we're in good health and very privileged and feeling good. So I also think that it's feeling everything, but kind of finding ways to tune in and to improve our mindset, even if we might not define it as positive, which is something I try to think about. But to answer your question, I think, yes, I'll admit I do wear an Oura ring since I've interviewed the company. And I was really worried about it because I didn't want to sort of be overcritical about my sleep. And I live in New York City. It's very loud outside my apartment. Sometimes I don't get the best sleep, even if I try. And I didn't want to feel hard on myself. But I found it really interesting because it also tracks your stress and, you're kind of seeing what might trigger you. I think it's made me think too, maybe what habits can I do before bed that has given me better sleep? And one of those is reading instead of scrolling, as simple as it sounds. Even if I read, I have told myself, if I can just read one page of my book before I go to bed, that's enough. So I think kind of lower the boundary of entry to do some of these things. And then I think, thinking also about mental wellness, it's something that, I wish I could say I've, mastered that mindset or that, mindfulness, and I absolutely have not. And it's something I would love to work on more. So I think knowing that, mindset and being mindful is really important. And we talk about being in the present moment a lot. And I want to be better at that, of just engaging. And I think that thinking about gratitude is helpful. I think, as simple as it sounds, trying to breathe more, thinking about just taking a moment, even when I'm on the subway or the bus and it feels overwhelming, to just breathe, to not even feel like I need to have a podcast in or be distracted on my phone. Kind of simple things like that, I think, to work on that mindset. And I think it's not something I feel like I've been great at. It's definitely my biggest improvement point that I want to work on, is how to sort of be more mindful in my everyday life, because we're always going to be hit with challenges and we're always going to be stressed about things, and things are going to come every which way. And we're going to feel a type of way about those things, and how to kind of take it more in stride. And it's easier said than done. I wish I had an answer for that one. But knowing that is a quote unquote biohack in and of itself, of kind of protecting our mind, and mental fitness is a phrase we're hearing a lot more about, that it's going to make you a better person, a better friend, a better partner, worker, all the things, it's like, yeah, let's work on that however we can. So that's something I'm thinking about, especially, in new year. But yeah, and I think the other big maybe biohack is sort of that piece of social connection and putting yourself out there. I've been vowing to kind of even just go to some events that I see that are interesting in the city alone, because you're kind of seem more approachable to meet people and make friends. Yeah. And so those are a few. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys would say.
Laura, do you want to share any?
You first, Mary.
Well, I do agree with the mindfulness. I practice mindfulness every morning. I meditate for 5 minutes. I also do deep breathing. And I do that for about 15 minutes. I do use a device. It's called Respirit. It's FDA approved. I'll share on the air that I use it. And it's really helped calm me and focus on my breathing. It's very similar to what the Navy SEALs use. My husband also showed me another kind of, I'd say, relaxing exercise. You put your feet up on a chair and you kind of lay down. Of course, we have a dog and she likes to jump on us, but it really it's almost like a mini nap, and you only do it for 5 minutes. So those are the kinds of things. And I think I always want to make my fitness routine better. And I always want to be a lifelong learner. So I'm thinking about what's the next certificate program or course that I can take. Obviously I'm in digital marketing. So yes, I want to keep learning whatever I can, customer journey, you name it. But I believe being a lifelong learner helps the curiosity. So those are some of the things I will continue to work on. And I think the last thing is I need to do a better job with the connections with some of my family members that I don't get to see too often. And like you said, if I'm thinking about them, send them a text message or give them a call. And I know people have done that with me, and I've been like, oh my God, thank you so much. Thinking
Feels
of
good.
you. It does. And also, I think the last thing is when I do know someone's name, to say hello by their name and maybe take a moment to ask how they're doing, or what have you been up to? What's new?
Yeah,
I don't know. Anything.
I love that. It's like if you can take away anything from some of the things we've talked about, that feels like it could be within reach, right? Is ask people their name, call them, text them when you think about them.
And then I guess I'll just one more thing, which is when you are engaging in a conversation with someone, most people love to talk about themselves, which is good. Ask more questions so you're not talking about yourself, but you're really interested in what they're doing, about their position or what they do in their free time, but really focus on them instead of you. Like you talked about going to events and networking, have it about the individual that you're speaking with.
Absolutely.
I think that is very powerful. So those are some of my ideas. Laura, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I'm going to keep it two simple things. I say simple, but it's going to take a lot of effort. I would say making the effort to connect more with people, whether it's text, phone call, in person, and then being more mindful about getting more sleep. But again,
it's a big one.
yeah, it's a lifestyle change. But as we wrap our conversation here, Alexa, thank you so much for everything you've shared with us, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning of our journey with you. But wanted to ask you, and you've touched on what I would consider possibly bits and pieces, but want to hear it from the source. What is your why? Why do you do the work that you do?
Wow. That's a good question. I would say the reason I do the work that I do is to connect with other people that are passionate about what they're doing, that have an interesting story to tell. I love the fact that my job includes being curious about other people, getting to talk to people on the phone. I think my why is to bring more people together, to connect and to have a conversation, to feel better. Yeah, that's the best I have right now.
I love that. I feel that in my soul. As Mary knows, it's all about, it's connections, it's people, it's curiosity. So I appreciate that message. Mary?
Alexa, if individuals want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? We will put everything in the show notes, as I mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. I can definitely be reached on email. Usually people pitch me stories that way, or just say hello, just alexa.mikhail@fortune.com. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. It's typically where I'll post a lot of my stories and sometimes the background of how it came to be. So I'd say that's a great place. Just my name and Fortune, you'll find me. Definitely connect and follow me on there. And feel free to message me as well. And then, yeah, I'm also on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm just first, last name, and would love to connect with more readers. I'd love to get feedback on things that you feel like you would love to see out there, and the stories that you want to be told, you want to see and you want to read. Is always something I would love to learn more about. So thank you. Yeah, thank you both so much. It's so fascinating.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Alexa. And thank you to our listeners for another great episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Until next time.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.